Bondi, the way it works is we ask you a question and you answer it. And if you go off on a wild goose chase, another tangent, you start reading statistics or you start talking about stuff going on in our district. And by the way, I invite you to my district. Come to my district, but that's not what we're here to do today. Okay? So, and you do that, then we're allowed to say we reclaim our time. At that point, you have to be quiet. You have no choice. You have to be quiet. So I hope you understand the rule at this point. Now, here's what I want to ask you.
All right. Watch this very carefully. Because what you're about to see later in this video is one of those moments in a congressional hearing where the temperature spikes from simmering to absolutely boiling over. We've got Congressman Jamie Raskin trying to keep the train on the tracks, and Attorney General Pam Bondi, Trump-aligned, combative, and visibly irritated, refusing to play by the rules that every other witness follows. And when Raskin finally snaps back and lays out those rules line by line, that's not just a procedural reminder. That's a power struggle, a real time clash between a lawmaker fighting to keep control of his limited minutes and a witness who thinks sidestepping is the same thing as answering. Before we get to that explosion, let's set the stage. Because the tension did not start at minute 4. It builds from the moment Raskin opens his mouth. This entire hearing is about legal boundaries, conflicts of interest, and the basic expectation that a nation's top law enforcement official should, at bare minimum, respect the process long enough to answer a straight question. But Bondi, throughout this transcript, constantly drags the conversation into unrelated talking points, personal jabs, and evasive detours that serve one purpose: derail the line of questioning before it reaches the uncomfortable parts. You'll see it yourself. Raskin tries to walk her through constitutional stakes, from the domestic emoluments clause to potential self-dealing by a sitting president who is literally suing the federal government he commands. But instead of clarity, Raskin gets deflection. And instead of transparency, he gets attitude. So our video today breaks down the 2 escalating chapters of this confrontation. First, Raskin lays down the constitutional framework, building a clean, factual path toward his main point, whether Bondi believes the president negotiating his own legal settlements with subordinate officials would violate the Constitution's ban on extra compensation. It's a serious question about abuse of office, and Bondi knows it. Watch how she dodges. Second, once Raskin moves to the privacy violations involving Epstein survivors and contrasts those with Trump's billion-dollar claims, the tension gets personal. Bondi explodes, accuses him of obsession, throws out Trump derangement syndrome, and then keeps interrupting until the entire committee intervenes. And that's the moment you saw in the teaser. That's where Raskin finally stops the hearing cold and tells her, "You have to be quiet." Those are the rules. So let's roll into the first chapter of this confrontation, the buildup that reveals exactly what set this whole thing off.
Recognizes the gentleman from Maryland.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start by saying I appreciate what you said, Attorney General Bondi, and you said it to me personally, that you take the personal security of every member of Congress seriously and that people can contact you about that. And in these times, that's a very serious matter. So I thank you for that. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 7 of the Constitution is the Domestic Emoluments Clause. And it says that the president is limited to his salary in office and cannot receive any other money from the federal government while he's in office. It cannot be increased by $1. This president is the first president in U.S. history who has repeatedly sued the federal government for $230 million for the judicial search warrant at Mar-a-Lago, which was perfectly lawful and was never struck down. But now he's suing the IRS for $10 billion. He's suing the IRS for $10 billion, which I think is around 80% of its annual budget, because his tax returns were leaked. And they were illegally leaked by a private contractor who actually is in prison now, Charles Littlejohn. But he wants $10 billion. Now, well, I want to ask you the question of whether you think it would violate the Domestic Emoluments Clause for you to settle that $10 billion case or any of the other claims that the president has made against the government. He himself has remarked, it's interesting because I'm the one that makes the deal, right? And he says, I kind of have to work it out with myself. Do you think it would violate the Domestic Emoluments Clause for the president to work out a deal from people who are his subordinates under his unitary executive theory to get money in one of these cases?
I'm not going to discuss pending litigation.
Okay, so theoretically you're saying because his privacy rights were violated in that tax case, and they were. I'm with the president on that. I mean, his Mar-a-Lago thing is ridiculous, but there's no doubt that his tax returns, despite the fact that he promised to release them, despite the fact that every other president released the tax returns, he suffered embarrassment when it showed that he hadn't paid taxes for several years, and he had a right for that not to happen. Now, I want to...
Okay, right here is where the fuse gets lit. Raskin starts with something deliberately respectful. He thanks Bondi for acknowledging congressional security concerns. That's not small talk, that's tactical. He's establishing rapport so the pivot hits harder. And then he makes the turn. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 7, the Domestic Emoluments Clause, a rule so basic that presidents for 2 centuries have avoided violating it. Raskin walks through the point cleanly. The president can't receive money from the federal government beyond his fixed salary. Period. He lays out the numbers, the lawsuits, the scale, $230 million for the Mar-a-Lago search, now a staggering $10 billion demand from the heirs over leaked tax returns. He's not exaggerating here. He's drawing a straight line between Trump's personal financial lawsuits and the Constitution's prohibition on exactly this kind of payout negotiated by subordinates inside his own administration. When Raskin asks Bondi whether settling those lawsuits would violate the Constitution, he's not asking a hypothetical. He's pressing a core conflict of interest scenario, the president working it out with himself in Trump's own words. And Bondi? She shuts down instantly. I'm not going to discuss pending litigation. That right there is the dodge. She doesn't address the constitutional issue. She doesn't address the conflict. She doesn't even acknowledge the seriousness of the question. She picks the one escape hatch that avoids engaging the substance. And watch how Raskin reacts. He doesn't blow up. He doesn't take the bait. He steps around her evasion by reframing, okay, if you won't discuss the lawsuit itself, let's talk principles. He acknowledges Trump's privacy rights in the tax leak, and this is key. He even expresses sympathy. That disarms her narrative that he's just attacking Trump. He gives ground on one point so he can move forward on the larger issue. Then, he pivots to the Epstein survivors, arguably the most sensitive, emotionally charged part of the hearing. He contrasts Trump's embarrassment over leaked returns with the actual endangerment and trauma these survivors faced after their names, phone numbers, and addresses were exposed, something Bondi's office was involved in. This is the moment the stakes shift. Raskin isn't just talking about constitutional theory anymore. He's talking about real people whose privacy was violated and whose safety was compromised. From here, the exchange accelerates. Raskin asks how much those survivors' claims should be worth if Trump's theoretical damages are in the billions. He presses her specifically. Does she even know who Chase Mulligan is? A defendant in his district involved in predatory behavior against minors. This is where Bondi loses her composure. It's not because the question was unfair. It's because the question forced her to confront selective outrage. Trump's privacy violation? Outrageous. Epstein survivors' privacy violation? Somehow brushed aside. And instead of answering, she attacks Raskin personally, launching into accusations, interrupting him mid-question, and trying to flip the script. That's not testimony. That's deflection under pressure. But we're not at the peak yet. The biggest escalation comes in the next section, the part where Bondi's attacks get louder, and Raskin decides he's done putting up with it.
I want to turn back to the Epstein survivors, because President Trump may have been a little bit embarrassed by the release of those tax returns. How much do you think the claims of these survivors are worth? As the good congressman from Kentucky just pointed out, there were lots of survivors who had decided, for reasons of their own, never to release their names. That determination was represented to people in Congress, and we built it into our federal law that their names could not be released, and yet you published their names, their phone numbers, their addresses, personally identifying information. If Donald Trump can get $10 billion theoretically from the Department of Justice, how much should these people get for a far worse violation of their privacy rights and a far greater danger established to them in their lives.
Do you even know who Chase Mulligan is? You're so obsessed with, you
Okay,
don't, do you?
I'm going to teach you the
just made
rules
a
again.
face.
You're the Attorney General of the United States. We have rules here.
You're obsessed with him.
You're the Attorney General of the United States.
With
And the rules,
obsessed with Donald Trump. You
No.
have Trump derangement syndrome.
Mr. Chairman,
Chase
I'd like my time
Mulligan will be
restored. I'd like my
sentenced
time
next week
restored.
in your district. In your district,
Stop
and you
the
don't
clock.
even know about it, about
Time-
keeping children
Time belongs
safe
to
from
the gentleman.
online predators.
Time belongs to the gentleman from Maryland. The gentleman can proceed.
Yeah, and I want the whole country to look at this. Because this is the Attorney General of the United States whose job is law enforcement. We've never had a witness who has misunderstood our rules and been unable to conform his or her conduct to our rules before. We have only 5 minutes, and so we use our time to ask you specific questions.
How long are you giving me to
Excuse
answer?
me, I'm not yielding to you right now. I'd like that second restored too. So, Ms. Bondi, the way it works is we ask you a question and you answer it, and if you go off on a wild goose chase, another tangent, you start reading statistics or you start talking about stuff going on in our district. And by the way, I invite you to my district. Come to my district, but that's not what we're here to do today. Okay? So, and you do that, then we're allowed to say we reclaim our time. At that point, you have to be quiet. You have no choice. You have to be quiet. So I hope you understand the rule at this point. Now, here's what I want to ask you. You're in law enforcement. We've seen all kinds of evidence of crimes. And when we go over to the Department of Justice for the 4 computers for every member of Congress, we see more evidence of crimes. Will you create a joint task force of the Department of Justice and governors and state attorney generals and district attorneys across the country to investigate the crimes that have taken place against these victims and more than 1,000 like them? The DOJ is not doing its job. Will you create a task force with state and local law enforcement to make that happen?
Gentlelady can respond if she wants to.
Thank you, Chairman. He called Chase Mulligan a wild goose chase and didn't even know who he was. He is a defendant in your own
Chairman,
district who
Mr.
preyed
Chairman.
on girls.
Mr. Chairman.
Well, you know what? If he were part of the Epstein investigation, you wouldn't do anything about it.
Online chat rooms and committed sextortion. Yet he didn't even know in your tiny little district who he was.
Mr. Chairman, she's embarrassing you.
He's about to be
This is your
Time.
committee, and she is embarrassing
Shame
you.
on you.
The time of the gentleman has expired. I would remind the committee that last Congress, Secretary Mayorkas was here numerous times, and he wouldn't answer our questions, even when we sent them to him ahead of time in writing. So that's what we...
This is where the hearing goes off the rails, and where Raskin takes it back. The moment Bondi interrupts with "You're so obsessed, I'm going to teach you the rules again," Trump derangement syndrome, you can see exactly what's happening. She's not just refusing to answer. She's trying to bulldoze the structure of the hearing itself. That accusation, "You have Trump derangement syndrome," is not an argument. It's a distraction grenade. And she throws it because Raskin's questions were cornering her into an uncomfortable contradiction. If Trump's embarrassment over leaked tax returns is worth billions, what do Epstein survivors deserve after their personal data was published under her watch? She doesn't want to go near that. So she lunges for the insult. But the second she does, the room shifts. You can hear the chairman intervene. Time belongs to the gentleman from Maryland. That's a polite way of saying you're out of order. Raskin uses that moment to regain total control, and this is the part from the teaser. Watch how he reframes everything. He's not emotional. He's not rattled. He's authoritative. He says, essentially, every witness before you has managed to follow the rules. You don't talk over us. You don't hijack the 5 minutes. You don't derail the questioning. And when he says, flatly, at that point, you have to be quiet. You have no choice. That's not pettiness. That is a reassertion of congressional prerogative. It's the line that separates testimony from theater. From that point on, Bondi is reacting, not controlling. She tries again to divert, bringing up unrelated crimes, throwing around district-specific jabs, even taunting Raskin about not knowing a defendant's name. But none of it changes the structure of the hearing, because the committee is no longer tolerating the detours. Raskin stays focused on the core issue. Will she commit to forming a joint task force to investigate crimes against these survivors? He's pressing her on enforcement failures, on coordination, on responsibility. And she does not answer. She responds instead with more personal jabs and more attempts to paint Raskin as ignorant of his own district. And then comes one of the most brutal lines of the entire hearing, not from Raskin, but about him. "She's embarrassing you." That's not partisan heat. That's raw frustration from a member watching the witness collapse the hearing into spectacle. But the key moment isn't the insult. It's what it represents. Bondi lost the thread. She lost the room. And she lost her ability to steer the exchange when the chairman closes out the segment reminding the committee that prior witnesses have also refused to answer questions, but that the Attorney General is doing just fine. It's not actually a defense. It's a reset. A way of saying we need to move on because this hit the point of diminishing returns. But the story is already clear. Raskin had the momentum. Bondi tried to break the rules to stop him. And when he reasserted control, the entire dynamic flipped. Now let's unpack why this matters, not just for this hearing, but for the bigger picture. This wasn't a clash about personality. It was a clash about accountability. When a president sues his own government for billions, when the Attorney General refuses to say whether the Constitution even allows negotiating that settlement, when survivors of sexual abuse have their private information exposed while the most powerful political figure in the world demands astronomical damages for embarrassment, those aren't separate issues. They're connected by a single thread, power being used differently depending on who holds it. Raskin's job in that hearing was to make those double standards visible. Bondi's job, at least in this moment, seemed to be preventing that visibility by any means necessary. And that's why the confrontation exploded. Because once Raskin clarified that she must follow the rules, she lost the ability to weaponize interruption. And once that tactic failed, nothing she said could cover the fact that she refused to answer the central questions. Does the Constitution bar the president from settling a lawsuit with himself through his subordinates? And why were Epstein survivors' private details released while Trump's embarrassment is treated like a billion-dollar injury? Those questions remain unanswered. And that silence speaks louder than anything in the transcript. So, what you just watched isn't just congressional drama. It's a textbook example of how evasion collapses under pressure when the rules are finally enforced. And that is why this exchange is going viral. It's the rare moment when procedural language becomes a weapon, and a witness's attempt to dominate the hearing backfires in real time. If you want more breakdowns like this where powerful people get pressed on the record, hit subscribe and drop your take in the comments. Who do you think came out stronger in this hearing? And what was the one moment that changed the whole exchange?